My name is Tessa, and at 32 I had a career most people would kill for and a family that made me feel like I was worth nothing. I grew up in a house where my brother got the standing ovation and I got the polite applause. My parents both had stable careers. My father worked in insurance for 20-something years, my mother managed a dental office, so it wasn't like we were struggling, we had enough. But enough in my house always seemed to flow in one direction. My brother Derek is 3 years older than me. He's charming in that way that makes people forget to look too closely. He was the one who got the car for his 16th birthday. I got a card and a $50 bill. He was the one my parents flew out to visit when he moved to Austin. When I moved to Portland for a new job, my mom said, "That's so far, Tessa. Why would you want to be that far?" I stopped expecting things to be equal a long time ago. That's what you do when you grow up the second child in a family where the hierarchy was never spoken out loud but everybody felt it. You learn to need less. You learn to celebrate quietly. You learn to stop announcing things because the silence after your announcement hurts more than if you'd said nothing at all. For 8 years I worked as a project manager at a logistics firm. I started at the bottom, coordinating small shipments, managing spreadsheets that nobody looked at, and I built my way up one painful year at a time. No one handed me anything. No mentors took me under their wing. I figured things out by staying late, by reading things I didn't have to read, by saying yes to projects other people didn't want. By 31, I was managing a regional portfolio worth more than I ever thought I'd be trusted with. I was proud of that. I'm still proud of that. But the thing that changed everything wasn't the promotion. It was the house. I'd been saving for 6 years. Quietly, the way I did everything. I didn't talk about it at family dinners. I didn't post about it. I had a spreadsheet I updated every Sunday night with my down payment fund balance, and watching that number grow was the most privately satisfying thing in my life. When I finally crossed the threshold I'd set for myself, I cried a little in my apartment kitchen. Not out of sadness, out of relief. Out of this enormous feeling of I did this, me. Nobody helped me. Nobody even knew. I found the house in a small town about 40 minutes outside Portland. It wasn't fancy. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, an old barn out back that I had no plans for but loved anyway. The previous owners had a garden that had gone a little wild, and I remember standing in it the first time, looking at the overgrown lavender and the crooked fence, and thinking, this is mine. This is actually going to be mine. The closing happened on a Thursday in October. I went alone. I signed my name 37 times. The notary made small talk about the weather. I drove home in silence with the key in my cup holder, and I sat in my apartment for a long time just holding it. That weekend, I went to the house and took a few photos. The porch in the afternoon light. The kitchen with its old subway tile. The view from the back window out to where the garden used to be. I didn't post them for 2 days. I just looked at them. I kept thinking I'd share them eventually, that I'd tell people, but part of me wanted to keep it just for myself a little longer. I posted them on a Sunday afternoon, a simple caption, "Bought myself the best birthday gift I've ever gotten." My birthday had been the month before. Within 20 minutes, my phone rang. It was my mom. "When did you buy a house?" she said. Not congratulations, not oh my gosh, Tessa. The first words out of her mouth were when did you buy a house, like I'd done something I needed to explain. "A few days ago," I said. "I've been saving for a while. Why didn't you tell us?" I almost laughed. I almost said, because the last time I told you something exciting, you spent 10 minutes talking about Derek's promotion instead. But I didn't say that. I said, I wanted to get through the closing first. She made a sound. Not quite disapproval, not quite hurt. Something in between. "Well," she said, "it's nice. The photos are nice." We hung up a few minutes later. I thought that was it. I went back to unpacking boxes, feeling a quiet, cautious happiness. 2 days later, my father called. He didn't open with pleasantries either. He said, "Your mother and I have been talking and we think you should let Derek stay at the house." I stood very still in my kitchen. "I'm sorry?" He and his girlfriend are having some trouble with their lease situation. They need somewhere to stay for a few months. You have all that space now and you're still keeping your apartment in Portland anyway, so I bought the house, Dad. It's my house. It's not a rental property. It's just temporary. Family helps family, Tessa. That phrase, family helps family. I had heard some version of that phrase my entire life, and it was always aimed at me, always asking me to give something and never, not once, directed at Derek in my direction. What happened to their place? I asked. My father sighed like I was being difficult. Derek made some investment decisions that didn't work out and they're a little behind on rent. The landlord isn't willing to work with them. I thought about the times I'd been tight. There were months early in my career when I ate rice and beans 3 times a week because I was trying to make rent and still put money away. I never called home. I never asked. It never occurred to me to ask because I already knew what the answer would feel like. I'm not doing that, I said. Tessa, no, Dad. I saved for 6 years for this house. Derek can figure out his situation. He said a few more things. I stopped really hearing them. I told him I had to go, and I hung up. I thought it was over. It wasn't over. Over the next 3 weeks, it escalated in a way I hadn't seen coming. My mother called twice more. She softened it differently each time, once framing it as just a few months, once suggesting that Derek could help with maintenance as a trade, as if my house was a problem I needed solved instead of something I'd worked for. My aunt called. My cousin sent a long Facebook message that started with, "I'm not taking sides, but," and then very clearly took a side. My parents' neighbor, a woman I'd known since childhood, who had known me since I was 7 years old, texted me to say she thought it was a little cold to have all that space and not help my brother. I didn't respond to most of them. I read the messages and set my phone face down and went back to whatever I was doing. But I'm not going to pretend it didn't get to me. It did. There were nights where I sat in my apartment, the same apartment I was still paying rent on, while also paying a mortgage because I wasn't ready to move fully yet. And I felt this slow, nauseating doubt. Not about whether I should give Derek the house. I was never actually in doubt about that. But about whether I was a bad person. Whether the version of me that those messages were painting was real, cold, selfish, unwilling to help family. I called my friend Margot one of those nights. Margot has known me since college, and she has a way of cutting through things without being cruel about it. "You know what's interesting?" she said. "None of these people asking you to give up your house are offering their own." I sat with that for a second. "Your parents have a 4-bedroom house," she said. "Your aunt has a spare room. Your cousin just bought a new place. Why is it your responsibility specifically?" I knew the answer. I had always known the answer, even when I pretended I didn't. It was my responsibility because I was the one who was supposed to give. That was the role I had in my family. Derek received, I contributed. That was how it had always been arranged, and everyone had simply accepted it without ever saying it out loud. "What are you going to do?" Margot asked. "I'm going to keep my house," I said. The real confrontation came on a Saturday in November. My parents drove up 3 hours unannounced and showed up at my Portland apartment while I was in the middle of doing laundry. My mother had a casserole dish covered in foil, which I think was supposed to soften whatever was coming. My father had the expression he wore when he'd already decided how something was going to go. We sat at my kitchen table. My mother put the casserole on the counter. Nobody mentioned the casserole again. My father started. He said that the family had talked, and they felt I was being unreasonable. He said that Derek was his son and he was struggling and he didn't understand why I couldn't just do this one thing. I said, "If Derek needs housing, you have a 4-bedroom house. He could stay with you." My mother's expression flickered. "That's different. How is it different?" Neither of them answered that. My mother tried a different angle. She said that it was hard to watch her children be at odds like this. She said she'd raised us to support each other. She looked genuinely pained when she said it, and I knew that part was real. She did find this painful. But I also noticed that her pain was about the conflict existing, not about the fact that Derek had gotten himself into this situation. Not about the fact that they had spent 32 years treating us differently and were now confused about why I didn't want to absorb the consequences of that. I'm not at odds with Derek, I said. I just won't give him my house. My father leaned forward. If you keep refusing, I want you to understand, this is going to have consequences for you within this family. When it comes to the estate, we will take this into account. I looked at him for a long moment. There it was, the threat I'd been waiting to arrive. The implication that my inheritance, my standing in the family, my seat at the table, all of it was contingent on my compliance. Something settled in me when he said that. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. Okay, I said. My father blinked. Okay. I mean, what would you be leaving me anyway? You spent the last 30 years making sure Derek was comfortable. Whatever's left will go to him regardless. I said it without bitterness, because by then I genuinely didn't feel much bitterness about it. I'd been grieving that particular dream since I was about 14. So yes. Okay. Note it in the estate planning. I'm keeping my house. My mother made a sound like she'd been physically hurt. My father stood up. He said some things I won't repeat here, things about gratitude and family and how I'd changed. They left without the casserole. I stood at my kitchen window and watched their car pull away, and I felt, and this is the honest truth, mostly just tired. Tired of the negotiation. Tired of performing enough smallness that they would find me acceptable. Tired of a version of family that only ran in one direction. I drove out to the house that afternoon. I'd been working on the garden slowly, on weekends, learning as I went. I didn't know anything about gardening when I bought the place. But I'd been watching videos and reading, and I'd cleared out a section near the back fence and planted some things that were supposed to do well in Oregon winters. I didn't know if they'd survive. I was okay with not knowing. I walked the property for a while. The barn, the porch, the old apple tree in the side yard that had been there since before I was born. I thought about what my father had said, and I thought about my mother's expression, and I thought about all the casseroles and loaded silences and phone calls with cousins I barely knew who had somehow formed opinions about my choices. And then I stopped thinking about all of that and just stood there in my own yard, in my own soil, with the gray November sky overhead. And I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Peace. Not the peace of having won something. More like the peace of having finally stopped pretending that the fight was winnable. You cannot make people see you as equal when they've decided a long time ago that you aren't. You cannot earn your way into the version of the family you deserved. Some things don't get fixed. Some debts don't get repaid, and the sooner you stop waiting for the repayment, the sooner you can use that energy for something real. The weeks after my parents' visit were quiet. My mother sent a couple of short texts around the holidays. Nothing that addressed what had happened, just logistical things about Thanksgiving and Christmas. I responded briefly. I did go to Thanksgiving. It was awkward in the way that things are when something has been said that can't be unsaid, but everyone is pretending it hasn't been said. Derek didn't mention the house. I didn't bring it up. We ate turkey and passed rolls and watched football and went home. It wasn't warm, but it was manageable. I moved into the house full-time in January. It took a weekend and 2 trips in a rented truck and a lot of help from Margot and her husband. I slept in my own house for the first time on a Sunday night in January, in a room I painted myself a shade of green that had taken me 3 tries to get right. Under a quilt my grandmother had made me years ago that I'd been keeping in a closet because I never felt like my apartments were the right place for it. That first morning I made coffee and stood on the back porch with my mug and watched the light come up over the field. The garden was mostly dormant. The apple tree was bare. The barn needed work I hadn't started yet. Everything felt like it was exactly where it was supposed to be. I'm not going to tell you that my family relationships transformed after that. They didn't. My parents and I are civil in the way that people are civil when they've decided, mutually and silently, not to pick the fight back up. My mother calls on birthdays. My father and I talk sometimes about surface things. Weather, work, sports. Derek and his girlfriend eventually found an apartment. I heard through my mother that things had stabilized for them, and I felt genuinely fine about that. I don't wish him badly. I just don't owe him my savings. What I do have is this, a house that is entirely mine. Every decision made in that house, from the paint color to the furniture to the vegetables in the garden, was made by me, for me, paid for by me. There is no one's fingerprints on it except my own. Nobody can call me and tell me I should give it away, because I know what I went through to get it, and I know what I'm worth, and those two things are no longer up for negotiation. Some people would say you should always put family first. I used to believe that, or I tried to. But I've learned something in the last few years that I wish someone had told me a long time ago. You can love your family and still say no. You can want good things for your brother and still not fund them. You can grieve the parents you deserved without hating the parents you have. And you can build something of your own, a house, a life, a sense of yourself without anyone's permission. My birthday is in September. This year, I spent it on the back porch with Margot and a few close friends, with good food and the kind of noise that comes from people who are genuinely happy to be in the same place. The garden had come back by then. Better than I'd expected. There were things growing that I hadn't planted, volunteers from the wild overgrowth of the previous owners, finally finding their footing after a season of being tended. My mother texted to say happy birthday. I texted back, thank you. And then I set my phone down and went back to my people and my yard and the life I had built for myself, slowly and quietly and entirely on my own terms. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. I've thought about this a lot since everything settled down. Not obsessively. I'm past that stage. But in the way you think about something when you're washing dishes or driving somewhere alone and your mind goes quiet enough to actually look at things clearly. What happened to me wasn't random. It was cause and effect, playing out over 32 years in plain sight. My parents made choices, small ones and large ones. And those choices created a version of Derek who genuinely believed that things would be handed to him. And a version of me who had learned so thoroughly to need nothing from them that I built an entirely separate life without even realizing that's what I was doing. Nobody woke up one morning deciding to be unfair. It just accumulated. That's how these things usually work. And my choices had consequences too. I chose for a long time to stay quiet, to celebrate privately, to want less. Those weren't bad choices. They protected me in ways I needed to be protected when I was younger. But by the time I was in my 30s, that same habit of shrinking was also keeping me from standing in my own life fully. The house forced me to stop shrinking. That wasn't an accident either. There's something I keep coming back to about Margot's question that night on the phone. She asked why it was my responsibility specifically. Not rhetorically, she genuinely wanted me to look at that. And when I did, I saw something I'd been stepping around for years. I had let myself be the family solution because I had never clearly said that I wasn't available for that role. Saying no to Derek's moving in wasn't just about a house. It was the first time in my adult life that I used my own judgment about what I owed my family and acted on it without waiting for their approval. That takes something. Not toughness, exactly. I don't think you have to be hard to hold a boundary. It takes a kind of honesty with yourself that is genuinely uncomfortable to sit with. You have to look at the people you love and see them accurately, not as you wish they were or as they present themselves, but as they actually are. My father is a man who uses inheritance as leverage. My mother is a woman who mistakes keeping peace for keeping love. Seeing that clearly isn't cruel. It's just true. And the truth, even when it's sad, is more useful than the comfortable version. What I want anyone to take from my story is this. The life you build with your own hands is the one that actually belongs to you. Not the one you inherit, not the one someone else designs for you. Not the one you're given as a reward for being agreeable enough. The one you build. It doesn't have to be a house. It can be a career you chose against everyone's expectations, or a friendship you kept when you were told it wasn't worth it, or simply the decision to stop explaining yourself to people who were never really listening. I still talk to my parents. It's not what I once hoped it would be, but it's honest in a way it never was before. And that, strangely, feels like more than what we had. Tessa's garden came back in the spring. Things she didn't even plant. That's the part I think about most.